We're back for another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly right here on WCTV. I'm Caleb Yager, and today Brock Owens is here to break down the latest in Waynesburg sports. And we're talking about football, men's and women's soccer, and volleyball. Now, Brock, for the football squad this past Saturday night, it was a struggle for the Yellow Jackets because they were only able to put up 3 points in the entire game, and that came on the first drive of the first quarter. A completely different story from last week against Teal.
Yeah, the last couple of games, they were really putting up points. They put up 33 against Case Western, and then they played Teal and put up 52 points. So I expected them to come out and at least start scoring, and they actually took a 3-0 lead, and then they just didn't score the rest of the game. So you'd just like to see them continue to put up points like they did the last couple weeks.
And Tyler Raines was 12 of 25, 149 yards. In the first 3 games of the season, he did not throw a single pick. But when you start to mention that, you can maybe start to think jinx, because he threw 3 interceptions in that game. One of them was for a pick 6. And Dakota Romantino has been the star. He's taken the spotlight for the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets these past couple of weeks, setting records and just getting national recognition as well. But he was not the leading receiver on Saturday. He had 3 receptions for 42 yards, and Matt Craig only had 1 reception for 10 yards. And for Trenton Currens, he stepped up and he was the leading receiver. Almost had 100 yards, but he got to 97 on 7 receptions. And also Carnegie Mellon, they came off a 13-6 loss to Grove City, and they completely took it to Waynesburg because Ben Mills had a great day. He had 128 yards on the day as well.
Yeah. Well, when you look at what they did, they were great on the pass defense, and the opposing quarterback was only 12 for 28 in his passes. They got sacked 4 times as well, but the rush defense, 33 carries, 162 yards, 3 touchdowns, and about 5 yards a carry. So that was the real problem.
On the defensive side for Waynesburg, the leading tacklers were senior Luke Mangus and also Davion Smith, who had 8 total tackles. 7 of them were solo tackles. Now we're going to move on to men's soccer, and it's just been, Brock, a rough start for them, especially with how close their games have been. They're 1-6 on the season so far. Last Monday, a week ago, while we were recording the show, they started their game against Lancaster Bible College with 7 minutes left in the second half. They had a 2-0 lead, but they let in 3 goals in a row, and they lost that game 3-2. And then this past Saturday, they played Marymount from Virginia. They lost that game 5-3. So it's a 1-6 start to the season. A lot of their games have been close, but probably not something you want to see when you head into conference play for this men's team.
Yeah, it's not the start they were looking for, Caleb. As you mentioned, pretty rough 1-6 start. Last game, 5-3 loss to Marymount. A bright spot in that game, though, was Seth Masadi, who got all 3 goals for Waynesburg. So that's a really big deal for the freshman.
Yeah, Seth Masadi stepping up, like Lark said, having 3 goals, and he had 7 shots total. 4 of those were on goal as well. Daniel Hott has also been a leader for this Yellow Jacket team, and we'll see if they can turn things around when they come to play on at Franciscan on Wednesday. We'll head over to women's soccer now. Haley Frizzell was one of the goal scorers in that game, and also Leah Holt stepped in as a substitute, and she also scored in that game, but it fortunately was not enough against a dominant Rochester women's soccer team. Rochester won 7-2 in that game, but the women's soccer team, they're 5th in the conference right now, but for both men's and women's soccer, no conference play has started yet. That will come on Wednesday when the men's and women's soccer team goes to Franciscan, like we mentioned. But women's soccer team, they're 2nd in the PAC for assists. Haley Johnson is tied for 4th in the PAC with goals. She has 5, and she leads the team so far. And the women's soccer team also has a 4-3 record to start the season.
Yeah, they've been playing very solid so far, and I'm not going to take that last game into consideration and put them against them. That 7-2 loss against Rochester. They do need to get some more shots off. Rochester won the battle 21-3 in shots on goal, so that was probably the biggest issue in that 7-2 loss, but as we know, Rochester is a very good team, Caleb.
And by total shots by period, it's outstanding how much Rochester shot. 25-4, they outshot Waynesburg in the first half, 24-3 in the second half, and they outshot Waynesburg in total 49-7 in that game on Saturday. But like we mentioned, they're back on action on Wednesday, but then they also come home on Saturday to take on the Grove City Wolverines right after the home football game against Grove City as well. And finally, we're going to talk about women's volleyball and what a start they've had to their season. Last in the year in the preseason, in the 2021 spring season, they only won 2 games. Now they're 8-7 and they're 2-3 in conference play. A little bit shaky these past couple of games, and they're within conference play right now. They're 2-3, but the last 4 of them they went 1-3. But 2 wins against W&J is pretty good for them.
Oh yeah, you love to see when Waynesburg gets wins over W&J. We're kind of thought of as, I guess, the little brother of W&J. So to really get those 2 big victories against them in volleyball, that's very big.
And Michaela Osborne, as a freshman, completely stepping up for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets. She's 6th in the PAC for kills, has 164 on the season. Allison Johnson, she leads the PAC in digs, which she also did in that shortened season last year. Plus, she hit the 1,000 dig mark, and she averages just over 6 a set. And Waynesburg is first in opponent hitting percentage as well. And their next game is going to be at home tomorrow when they take on the Grove City Wolverines. Just a big week for Waynesburg and a lot of red and white for the Grove City Wolverines. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about football with Riley Holsinger, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. We have Riley Holsinger here to be talking about the Waynesburg University football team, and we're going to jump right into it. Their last game, they lost 39-3 to Carnegie Mellon. Riley, what do you take away from this game?
Well, I'm going to take away that this team's success is going to really hinge on how well the offense performs, and that can go whether it's towards this matchup against Carnegie Mellon or any other team. But in the past couple of games before the Carnegie Mellon game against Case Western Reserve and against Teal, we really saw this offense really come alive for Waynesburg in the past couple of games. We saw big performances from Justin Flack, from Tyler Raines, who ended up being named Offensive Player of the Week in the President's Athletic Conference, and that big performance by Dakota Romantino, in which he finished second in school history with receiving yards in a game. So it's going to really rely on that offense there. But in that Carnegie Mellon game, we didn't see any offense, which hence leads to Waynesburg losing 39-3 in that game. Only 194 yards of total offense in that one. Tyler Raines didn't have his best performance out there after being named Offensive Player in the PAC. After that week, he only went 12 for 25, 149 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So it was a little bit of a rough performance from him. The one bright spot I will pull away from that matchup was Trenton Kearns, 7 catches, 97 yards. That was a solid performance from him. But then you have the receiving core get hit up a little bit and dinged with injuries as Dakota Romantino exits that game a little early, and we're not sure if he's going to be suiting up this Saturday in the matchup against Grove City College. So it really, Brock, to answer your question, it's all going to determine on the success of the offense for Waynesburg to go out and win some of these games.
Now, through the first 3 games of the season, Tyler Raines did not throw a single pick, and on Saturday he threw 3 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6. And Dakota Romantino these past couple of weeks has been setting records and getting national recognition. But yet, on Saturday, he only had 3 catches for 42 yards. But Trenton Kearns had 7 receptions for 97 yards. So what do you think, was it more of an offensive problem or a really good job on the defensive side for Carnegie Mellon?
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit last week here on Jacket Sports Weekly. Carnegie Mellon has a really solid defense. Against Grove City, Carnegie Mellon only gave up 13 points to Grove City, which I think is a pretty solid team out there, with Josh Estick quarterback, Peyton Scully at running back, and Cody Gustafson at wide receiver. I think they're pretty solid offensively, and I think Carnegie Mellon has a really solid defense, hence on why they were able to limit Grove City to only 13 points and then to 3 to Waynesburg in that matchup. So that's probably the biggest answer there for you, Caleb. But I think it helped Waynesburg having guys like Dakota Romantino on this team now that other teams can be afraid of in the passing game that'll free up guys like Matt Craig and like Trenton Kearns to go out there and make plays. And Trenton Kearns, he's done a great job over the past couple of weeks taking advantage of those opportunities that he's been given, Caleb.
Yeah, and going away from the passing game, let's look at the running game. Justin Flack, usually a big star for this Waynesburg offense, 13 carries, 35 yards. What do you make of Flack's performance?
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon just has a really tough front seven, and we knew that was going to be an issue heading into the matchup, or at least the coaching staff and Justin Flack and the whole offense knew that was going to be an issue heading into the matchup there against the Tartans, and it ended up being an issue. Justin Flack, he'll even say it himself, he doesn't really rush as well against Carnegie Mellon. He hasn't had a stellar performance against the Tartans yet in his collegiate career, so it's not overly too surprising that they were able to limit him a little bit, although you would have expected Waynesburg to kind of maybe pound the rock a little bit more like how they did in that first game against Muskingum. But I'd look for Justin Flack to kind of maybe shake off that performance this week against Grove City, a team who isn't as solid defensively, but they're still a very solid team when it comes to defense.
And speaking of defense, let's take a look at the defensive side of things for Waynesburg. The two leading tacklers for Waynesburg on Saturday were senior Luke Mangus, but also Javion Smith. And what do you make of the freshman's performance?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Javion Smith right here because he's been a stellar performer on defense for Waynesburg so far this season. He's done a really good job. So let's take a look at his stats from that game. 8 tackles, 2 of those tackles are for a loss. He had a sack, 1 forced fumble that ended up being recovered by Waynesburg, and then a pass breakup as well. So Javion Smith, he's done a tremendous job of taking advantage of the opportunities he's been giving, whether if that's in the kickoff return game or whether if it's just him getting all these reps on defense. And this is a secondary that needs the youth to step up because they do have some talented pieces in the secondary. You mentioned Luke Mangus there. He's the veteran. He's the seasoned guy in the secondary here for Waynesburg. But you have to look at those guys like Javion Smith and Brandon Tyson as really 2 bright spots of this defense to look at moving forward, not only for the rest of this year, but the rest of their collegiate careers.
Yeah, and you were talking about those defensive backs that were bright spots, and in this game against Carnegie Mellon, the passing defense wasn't the problem, it was more the run defense. How do you think that's going to kind of make its way for the rest of the season?
Yeah, so it's no secret that the defense has been really struggling for Waynesburg so far this year. Week 1, Waynesburg gives up 200 yards on the ground against Muskingum, and I don't really see Waynesburg not improving too much in the run-stopping game here. They don't really have any guys on the defense that can really come up and make big plays, and I think that all starts in the trenches there for when it comes to stopping the run game for Waynesburg. They need better play from guys like Lucas Donnelly, from Joel Zellum, from all the other guys that they're going to have on that line there to make big plays. But giving up 162 yards against Carnegie Mellon isn't good. And Grove City loves to run the ball, so watch out for Peyton Scully to have a big day because he potentially will against this Grove City or against this Waynesburg rushing defense because they're really not that solid when it comes to stopping the run.
And as you mentioned, they have Grove City next. They're coming off a loss, but it's not a bad loss. 33-32 to Westminster. And the week before, they actually played Carnegie Mellon and got the victory 13-6. How do you see this game shaking out?
Yeah, well, Grove City's pretty good. So against, they ended up losing by point to the PAC champion of last year in Westminster. I'm not really expecting this one to go Waynesburg's way, Brock.
And that's all the time we have here for talking about football. When we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, we will be talking about men's soccer.
We just wrapped up our discussion about Waynesburg football. We're going to talk some more Waynesburg football, but more commonly known around the world as soccer. So here to talk about Waynesburg soccer with us is our analyst, Joe Venzel. And Joe, it's been a kind of a rough start for the men's soccer team. They're currently 1-6 on the season. And on last Monday, while we were actually recording this show, Waynesburg was up 2-0 against Lancaster Bible College, and they ended up being defeated 3-2. And then they also lost against Marymount on Saturday 5-3.
Yeah, Caleb, and like you said, I was hosting with you when you broke that news about the Waynesburg loss to Lancaster Bible. And one of the things that I want to take away from that game is they were leading up into the second half 2-0, Waynesburg over Lancaster. But Lancaster Bible, during the course of the game, 26 shots to Waynesburg 10. And, that's going to kill you. And especially if you can't get the offense going, your defense has a lot of struggle picking up your slack. And, it's a tough break for Waynesburg, and like I said, the downfall of this game was the 3 goals in 3 minutes by, Chad Tolson, first one in the 84th minute for Lancaster, then Owen Nell, assisted by Chad Tolson in the 85th minute, and then Chad Tolson caps it off in the 88th minute by his assistant partner, Owen Nell. And it's just, you're going to have those breaks, and it's going to lose you that game. You can't do that.
Yeah, and then looking at the last game, they lost 5-3 to Marymount. What did you see? What happened in that game?
No, definitely in that game. Like I said, Waynesburg on the offensive side, not too bad. Seth Muscotti, the hat trick, 3 goals on 4 shots in that game, and 4 shots on goal, I should say, 7 shots in total. But you have that offensive side to where you have 1-2 players doing very well, but your defense lacks on the other side of that. 26-3, Marymount has the total on shots in that one, and then 13-8 shots on goal. Marymount takes that. You have more shots, you have more shots on goal. It's just the same thing. Your defense really breaks down, and one key thing that I did take away from that game, Michael Francis, the freshman goalkeeper for Waynesburg, had 13 saves as well in that one, and Marymount was getting a lot of breakaway opportunities, and it's kind of tough, especially for a freshman goalkeeper.
Now, a common theme that we've talked about with the men's soccer team is that they've only won 1 game this season, and it was 8-2 against La Roche early on. But throughout the season, it's been a lot of overtime losses. It's been one goal losses. One game was double overtime. With a couple exceptions of the Marymount game where they lost 5-3, and also Baldwin Wallace where they lost 4-0. But they've shown that they can compete in a lot of these games. So what do you kind of take away from that as they head into conference play?
No, especially, like you said, we have been very close and very battle-like in these games coming up. And non-conference play does, show you for what conference play will come. And we have Franciscan on the 29th on Wednesday, and we'll see what they can do with that. But, you build that non-conference play to get that sense of competition for the PAC play. I mean, where it matters. I mean, it kind of stinks that we do have 1-6, 1 win, but we get that conference play going, show what we can do in conference play, and just roll with that throughout the rest of the season.
Yes, as we mentioned, Franciscan is going to be taking place on Wednesday for the men's soccer team. Also on Saturday, after the homecoming football game, men's soccer team will take on Grove City. It's going to be a full day of Grove City Wolverines. And when we come back, we'll be talking women's soccer with Tyler Zeman.
We're back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and now we're going to get into talking about women's soccer here at Waynesburg University. And, of course, we have Tyler Zeman with us to talk about it. And their last game didn't really go so well for them, Tyler. They lost 7-2 against Rochester. What did you see out of that performance?
Well, it was a tough loss, but Rochester is a very, very good soccer team. And Waynesburg actually started out pretty strong. They got on the board first through senior Haley Frizzell, who scored in the 14th minute. And that was actually the first road goal that Rochester conceded all season. And they had 4 previous road games. So, that's a good sign. Waynesburg's offense firing against any team, any skill level. But then Rochester really just turned it on. They scored in the 19th, the 27th, the 37th, and then the 38th minute to go up 4-1, and that's really what put Waynesburg behind. Defensively, they were just not there on Saturday, and it really hurt them from the start.
Now, Haley Johnson has put her name out in not only the PAC, just in the PAC and for the Waynesburg women's soccer team. She's tied 4th in the PAC with goals. She has 5 on the season, and she leads her team in that category as well. So how much of an impact has she had for the Yellow Jackets?
Well, as a freshman, she's had a pretty big impact. Last year, they weren't really known for their goal scoring. With her coming in this season and already leading the team with 5, that's a very good start for her and for the team offensively. She has a great leadership in front of her. Like I said, senior Haley Frizzell, who's also a forward, she scored on Saturday. So she has great leaders in front of her, to help her get acclimated to the PAC and kind of college soccer in general.
And they went with a bit of a shift for the goalkeeping duties. They had a goalkeeper in for each half, and there was 14 saves in this game for Waynesburg. What do you take away from that and how they gave up 7 goals still?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, defensively they were just nowhere. Rochester had 49 total shots, 21 on goal. So that's just a lot to handle in the first place for any goalkeeper. But like I mentioned, Rochester's a very good team. Waynesburg, it's not time to hit the panic button yet. They have PAC coming up, their first PAC game on Wednesday coming up. So those are the games really what matters. And they didn't start too bad to the season, 4-3 right now overall. Like I said, it's not time to hit the panic button. Waynesburg just has to adjust and bring it on Wednesday.
Now, the 2 games that they have coming up this week are Franciscan University on Wednesday and Grove City College on Saturday, and 2 more competitive teams in the PAC. So what do you see going into those games, and how can Waynesburg bring its best to those games?
Well, Waynesburg has to shoot the ball. I know last week I was up here talking about it. They just have a fear of, I guess, shooting whenever they're behind. On Saturday, they only had 7 total shots and only 3 were on goal. You can't be in games, you can't win games with only 7 total shots. You need more like around 10, 15 total shots, 7 on goal, somewhere in that, regard to be competitive. But they just get in these little habits of not shooting the ball. When they play Franciscan on Wednesday, they have to shoot the ball. They cannot be scared because, they need goals to win games. And like I said before, all they need is 1. So if they can just lock down defensively and they aren't afraid to shoot the ball, then they have a good chance.
Franciscan started the year 3-2, as opposed to Waynesburg's 4-3. So does it seem like a pretty even matchup to you, Tyler?
I mean, Franciscan, they played some teams that are around the same level that Waynesburg played. I know Franciscan does play today at 4 against Pitt Greensburg, so I guess we'll have to see how that goes. Both of them could go into the matchup with 4 wins, so I think it'll be a pretty close game. But like I said, Waynesburg just can't be afraid to shoot the ball.
Well, that's all the time we have talking about women's soccer. As we mentioned, they play Franciscan Wednesday night after the men's soccer game. But when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, we'll be talking about volleyball.
Saturday night. You know what that means. Time to party. Sam is having a good time, watching sports, drinking beer, playing Pong. Not a care in the world for Sam. Nobody at the party stopped Sam. They let him walk out the door with his keys, even though he was stumbling, having a hard time to stand up. What happened less than 10 minutes later would change Sam's life forever.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV, and now we're going to talk about volleyball for our next segment. And here to discuss volleyball with us is our volleyball analyst, Austin Bechtold. And Austin, the team is doing a lot better than previous years. They're currently 8-7 on the season, but they went 1-3, in the past 4 games to open up conference play.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. Really, the first thing that I want to mention is, they've struggled in their last couple of games. But overall, volleyball in the last 2 seasons before the 2021 season here in the fall, because we had the spring 2021 season as well, they won 6 games in those 2 seasons. Already 8 wins. So obviously you don't want to lose 3 out of 4, but it's already a positive, I think, that you've seen for this program under Coach Emily Taylor, where in her second season, for this team to be able to take a little bit of a step forward. And once PAC is beginning, we've seen some of the bumpy stretches so far, and some of the non-conference games. Really, what you want to use is really a tune-up to be able to get to those PAC games. We're a little bit more successful than what we've had now, but the Bethany game is one that I really look at and say, I don't really understand how the team can really lose this badly. They didn't perform very well at all, getting swept against the Bison. And just the whole entire style of how they played the game wasn't really up to par of what we've seen lately, at least in the early portion of the season from Waynesburg. So as you mentioned, Caleb, 8-7 overall, 2-3 in PAC play. And the start hasn't been great in conference, but I still think that there's a lot of positive signs to look at this team and think that they're definitely improving and building on what could be an even more successful season.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they're starting conference play 1-3. They lost their first 3, but they are coming off a win against W&J. What do you have to say about that, Austin?
Yeah, 5-set victory against W&J. Always good to be able to defeat W&J, a local rival of Waynesburg. I think just the whole entire catalyst of this team has been Michaela Osborne. We've seen just her fantastic play. She's only a freshman. She's 5'7" from Salem, Ohio. She has been the absolute difference maker in this entire season for Waynesburg, and I got an opportunity to talk to Coach Taylor about just what she's meant from this team. She's really calm. She's collected with how she plays. She really doesn't have that many highs and lows, and she's just been overall a solid player that always wants to learn and get better. And I think we definitely saw that against W&J, where really, even though she's a freshman, we've seen a lot of leadership from her, and especially Allison Johnson as well, who recorded her 1,000th career dig, a massive milestone in the game of volleyball defensively.
And you mentioned a couple players that have been stepping up, like Michaela Osborne and Allison Johnson. But who are the players that you think need to step up? Because a pattern that we've noticed from a lot of these Waynesburg games are when they get down and when they're being defeated, there's usually not a comeback. And when they get down, they can't come back up and play into the game as well. So what are some of the things that you think they need to improve on in order to, as we go in further into conference play?
I don't really know if there's one player that I would necessarily identify, but I think just collectively, you need to have less errors. We've seen this team has really been able to not be able to get out of ruts and be able to break out of runs that the other team will be able to put against them. And one major thing of volleyball is being able to side out and get a stop. And there is a thing, as maybe not in some other sports you can speculate on, there's a thing is momentum in volleyball. If you're being able to set up your offense, be able to get the free balls that you want, set up good sets, and be able to run some effective plays, your offense is going to look completely different. And whenever you get those errors, you lose your confidence, you lose your ability to have that trust that your setter could even have in your players and the front row, and you get a lot of outside sets, not a lot of type of differential in where the ball is going, whether it be to the middle or the right side. So be able to try to collectively become a little bit more balanced, and if you are able to fix some of the errors that we've seen early on, it's going to just be a better play collectively, and offense helps defense, defense helps offense. If you're able to play on both sides of the ball well, you're going to be able to have some success, and I think it is coming. We've seen some great signs from this team, not so much of late as we begin conference play, and especially in a loss to Franciscan, one of the teams in the very bottom of the PAC standings, but I still think that Coach Taylor has a good wrap of what's going on this team, and especially being a young team that they are, they got a lot of room to grow, and I think that it could definitely continue this season, and I'm really looking forward to see where it goes.
Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., volleyball is back in action against the Grove City Wolverines, but when we come back, we're going to be reviewing the top 5 plays of the week right here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
You're watching WCTV, where we aim to bring you the best local coverage of what you care about most. Everything from local businesses to hometown sports and the latest weather. We're keeping up to date with what you need to know about issues that affect our campus and our community. We're telling the stories that matter, celebrating our past, our future, and our potential. So tune in for all the latest buzz right here on WCTV Channel 14, Waynesburg.
You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV. Now it's time for the top 5 plays of the week for Waynesburg University sports. Let's take a look. Here we go. Number 5, it's women's soccer, Rochester and Waynesburg. Saved not by the goalkeeper, but it's the defender, Grace Ingram. Let's take a look at that again in slow motion. Saves it with the right foot. More from this game coming up.
And into number 4, and we got volleyball. Keep it up, and Michaela Osborne sends it down. And Waynesburg gets the point. Let's watch that again in slow-mo. And Osborne between the Bison defenders.
Number 3, men's soccer. Up and into the back of the net. That was Seth Masadi with the left foot. Alex White with the pass to Seth Masadi, puts it in the back of the net. More from this game coming up.
And women's soccer, Vinay, Kabrisky, and Holt puts it in the back, and she takes the bump. Watch it again in slow motion, and she almost hits off the pole, but she puts it in the net.
Number 1, Seth Masadi once again. He puts it in the back of the net, this time from outside the 18. That was his 3rd goal of the game. He goes back behind the defender, left foot. What a strike from Masadi. That was your number 1 play. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have here on Jacket Sports Weekly. From Brock Owens and Caleb Yager, we say thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time right here on WCTV.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.